Welcome to Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings. Today we begin with the birth of Feraydun. Many days passed, and Zahhak lived in fear. The noble Feraydun was born, and the world was renewed. He grew as tall and as straight as a cypress tree, and Jamshid's imperial far radiated about him, as if he were the sun. He was as necessary to the earth as rain, as fitting to the soul as wisdom. The turning heavens passed over Feraydun, and cherished him with loving kindness. The cow, called Barmaya, the most beautiful, splendid of all cows, was also born. She was like a peacock, and every hair of her body was a different color. Wise men, astrologers, priests gathered about her and said that no one in the world had ever seen such a cow or heard of the like of her from ancient sages. In his search for Feraydun, Zahhak had filled the earth with rumors, and Feraydun's father, Otbin, fled in fear. But he fell into the lion's trap and was caught by some of Zahhak's malevolent guards. They trussed him up like a cheetah and took him before Zahhak, who killed him. When Feraydun's mother, Faranak, saw what had happened to her husband, she feared for Feraydun. Sick at heart, she made her way to the meadow where the cow Barmaya grazed. She went to the meadow's owner and wept bitter tears, saying, "Take this unweaned child into your safe keeping. Accept him as a father would from his mother, and nourish him with that splendid cow's milk. If you desire payment, my soul is yours, and my life will be hostage to your wishes." The keeper of the thickets and of the splendid cow answered, "I shall be a slave to your son, and I will do as you have asked me." Faranak handed her son over to him, and gave him lengthy advice on how to bring up the boy. This protector was like a father to Feraydun, and for 3 years he fed him the cow's milk. But Zahhak did not rest in his search, and the world was filled with talk of the splendid cow. Faranak hurried to the meadow again and said to the man who had saved her son, "God has put a wise notion into my heart, and I must act on it, because my son is as sweet as life to me. I will leave this land of magicians and go with my boy toward India. I'll disappear from men's sight and take this handsome child to Alborez mountains." She traveled with her son as quickly as a courier, and when she reached the uplands, she was like a mountain sheep in her agility. There was a religious man living there who had cut himself off from the cares of the world, and Faranak said to him, "Reverend sire, I have come here grieving for my Iran. You should know that this noble child of mine will be the leader of his people. He will cut off Zahhak's head and cast his belt and crown in the dust." The good man accepted her son from him without a sigh. One day news reached Zahhak of the meadow and of the cow Barmaya, and like a maddened elephant he came there and killed her, together with all the other animals he could see nearby. Then he quickly made his way to the house where Feraydun had been living and searched it, but found no one there. He set the fire to the building and he razed it. When Feraydun was 16 years old, he descended from the Alborez mountains to the plain and came to his mother, asking her to reveal the secrets of his lineage to him. He said, "Who was my father? Who am I? What family am I from? How can I tell people I am? Tell me what knowledge you have of all this." Faranak replied, "My ambitious son, I will tell you all you have asked. You are from the land of Iran, and your father was a man named Abidin. He was the scion of kings, a wise man and a warrior, who troubled no one. He was descended from Tammuz, from father to son. He was your father, and a good husband to me. All the brightness of my days was from him. And then Zahhak, who delights in magic, tried to kill you, and I hid you from him. What evil days I passed at that time! Your young noble father sacrificed his life for yours, and I went to a wooded area no one would know of. There I saw a cow, as lovely as a garden in springtime, and of wondrous beauty from head to foot. Her keeper sat before her like a king, and I gave you to him. For many days he brought you up, cradling you tenderly in his bosom, and feeding you the cow's milk, which made you grow into a fearsome warrior. Eventually the king heard of this cow and the meadow where she lived. He went there and killed your kind, mute, wet nurse, and then he razed our home, sending its dust up into the sun, and made that tall building into a ruin. Feraydun sprang up, enraged by his mother's words. His heart was filled with pain, his head with a longing for vengeance. Frowning in anger, he answered his mother, "A lion becomes brave by being tested. The magician has acted, and now it's time for me to grasp my sword. With God's help, I shall raise the dust of battle over Zahhak's palace." But his mother said, "This is unwise. You have no followers anywhere, whereas Zahhak is crowned and rules the world, and his army ready for battle. If he wishes, he can summon you to his side 100,000 warriors from each country. That is how you should fight. Don't see the world through a child's eye. Whoever drinks the wine of youth can see only himself, and in that stupor he will throw away his life. I seek for you joy and prosperity in all you do." Day and night Feraydun's name was on Zahhak's lips. In his greatness he feared his fall, and his heart was filled with terror as of every thought of Feraydun. One day, seated on his ivory throne and with a turquoise crown on his head, Zahhak summoned the great men from every country to bear witness to his reign. He said to the sages gathered there, "You are wise, skilled men, and all wise men know I have a secret enemy. I do not underestimate even a contemptible enemy, and I fear that an evil fate awaits me. I must increase the size of my army with men and demons, the two mixed together. I'm impatient to accomplish this, and you must agree to it. Now, a testament is to be written stating that your leader has sown nothing but seeds of righteousness, that he says only what is true, and that he is zealous in the pursuit of justice." Out of fear, Zahhak, the great men gathered there, witnessed the document, young and old. They signed their names to that evil monster's claim. At this moment, the cries of someone demanding justice were heard at the door. The plaintiff was brought in and given a place in front of the nobles present. Zahhak frowned and said to him, "Tell us, who has been unjust to you?" "I'm Kaveh, and a blacksmith, sire," he said, and as he spoke, his clenched fist struck his head. "It's you who accuse. You are the one whose fires destroyed all that I've ever done. A king, then, or a monster? Which are you? Tell us, your majesty, which of the two? If you reign over 7 kingdoms, why must our fate be to suffer and to die? Acquit yourself, then, and let me weigh your worth, and let your words astonish all the earth. And when we've heard you out, we'll see the evils that the world has done to me, and why it is my son's brains have to feed your snakes' insatiable and monstrous greed." Zahhak was astonished to hear such language. He returned Kovac's son to him and tried to win him over with flattering words. Then he ordered Kaveh to sign the testament. But when Kaveh had read the document through, he turned to the assembled elders and said, "You're in the demon's clutches now," he roared. "Your hearts, evil, no longer fear the Lord, and all your faces are set fair for hell. Your hearts believe Zahhak, you wish him well, but I will never sign or give a thought to this corrupted tyrant and his court." He stood trembling with rage as he ripped the testaments in two and flung them at his feet. Then, preceded by his stalwart son, he strode, shouting from the palace, into the public thoroughfare. The elders said to the king, "On the day of battle the heavens do not dare to send cold winds against you. So why should this foul-mouthed Keva be allowed to grow red in the face before you, as if he were a companion of yours? Why should he rip our testament to you in pieces and ignore your commands?" The king answered, "You will hear a wonder from me." When Keva appeared in the doorway, and I heard his voice, it was as if a mountain of iron appeared in the palace between the two of us, and when he beat his head with his fists, I felt my heart break within me. I do not know what will come of this. No man knows the heavens' secrets. When Kaveh left the court, a crowd gathered about him in the marketplace. He continued to shout his demands for justice, and he hoisted his leather blacksmith apron on a spear as a rallying point. So many men crowded about, the dust rose in the air, and Keva strode forward with the spear in his hands, shouting, "You are God-fearing noblemen, and if you're of Feraydun's party, free yourselves from Zahhak's chains. This king is Ahriman in his heart. He is God's enemy." As he went forward, an army gathered around him, and it was not a small one. Kaveh knew where Feraydun was, and he made straight for the new commander's court. As the court caught sight of his approach, a thunderous cry went up, and when the prince saw the leathern apron, he took it as an omen of good fortune. He draped it in a roomy brocade, and adorned it with a device of jewels on a ground of gold, and made fringes for it of crimson, yellow, and purple. At the top of the spear he placed a splendid globe like the moon. He called the apron the Kavaniwan banner, and his time forward, any man who assumed power and placed the royal crown on his head would add new jewels to the blacksmith leather's apron. The Kavawani banner became so splendid with its brocade and skills and silks that it shone in the night's darkness like the sun, and the world took hope from its brilliance. The world continued in this way for a while, and the future was unclear. Feraydun saw that Zahhak's days were numbered, and he crowned himself and made his way to his mother. "I must leave now for battle," he said. "Your task is to pray to the world's creator in good fortune and bad." His mother wept and prayed, "Great God, I place my trust in you. Protect my son from evil and clear the world of the unwise." Feraydun quickly prepared for his departure, but kept his plans secret. He had two noble older brothers, Kianush and Barmaya. He said to them, "Take heart and live in joy, my brave companions. The heavens can only turn for the better, and the royal crown will come back to us. Bring me skilled blacksmiths, and have a massive mace made." The two hurried to the blacksmith's bazaar, and all its inhabitants, who were eager for fame, made their way to Feraydun. The prince took a pair of compasses and drew a picture of an ox-headed mace in the dust. The blacksmith set to work, and when they'd forged the heavy mace, which glittered like the sun in the heavens, they took it to Feraydun. He was pleased with their work, and he gave them gold, silver, and clothes as a reward. He promised them a better future and said, "If I can lay that monster beneath the earth, I shall wash the dust from your heads. I shall guide the world toward justice, remembering the name of God from whom all justice comes." Feraydun lifted his head to the sun and prepared to avenge his father. He set off on the day of Khordad, when the omens were favorable, and upon an auspicious star. An army gathered about him, and his glory rose up to the clouds. Strong elephants and oxen bearing the army's provisions preceded the column, and Kianush and Barmaya were at the king's side as if they were his loyal younger brothers. And so Feraydun went forward like the wind, stage by stage, his head filled with thoughts of vengeance and his heart with justice. Traveling quickly on their Arab horses, they reached a place where men who had devoted themselves to God lived. Feraydun dismounted and sent greetings to them. As the night darkened, a man came forward to welcome them. His musky hair reached to his feet, and his face was like that of a houri in paradise. This angelic figure came to the prince to teach him the secrets of magic, so that he would know the keys to hidden things. Feraydun understood that this was a divine being, and not an emissary of evil. His face flushed like the blossoms of the Judas tree, and he rejoiced in his youth and good fortune. His cook made a meal fit for a nobleman, and when he had eaten, his head became heavy with sleep. Feraydun's brothers saw the holy man's behavior and how the prince's good fortune flourished, and they decided to destroy him. Feraydun was sleeping sweetly at the foot of a mountain, and late that night the two brothers slipped away from the army and climbed up to where a huge rock overhung the prince. They set it tumbling down the mountainside to kill their sleeping brother, but by God's command the noise of the rock's wall woke Feraydun, and he stopped it in its descent by means of a magic spell. The rock halted and never moved again. Then Feraydun rose and prepared to continue on his journey, saying nothing to his brothers about what had happened. He made for the river Arwanda, and if you do not know Parlave, the river is called the Tigris. And he pitched camp on its banks, close to the city of Baghdad, and sent word to the ferrymen that there being needed boats to transport his army across the river. But the man neither sent any craft nor came to talk with Feraydun. His answer was, "The world's king has told me in private that I am not to let so much as a mosquito cross the river without his permit, sealed in the correct manner." Feraydun was enraged by his reply. His mind was focused on the coming battle, and undeterred by the river's depth, he mounted his brave horse Galrang and urged it into the water. His companions quickly followed suit, plunging their mounts in the river so that the river rose above their saddles. The prince and his army reached the further bank and went on towards Jerusalem, which was called in the Pahlavi Gangdash-Fuk, and was where Zahhak had built his palace. Now, when they were a mile from the city, the king saw a palace with walls that shone like the planet Jupiter in the heavens, and were so high that they seemed to reach for the stars. He knew that this was the great palace, which seemed a place of joy and peace, but was the home to the monster Zahhak. And he said to his companions, "I fear that anyone who can raise such a building on the dark earth is somehow secretly favored by fate. Rather than delay, we had better attack immediately." He shouldered his mace and urged his horse forward, bearing down on the palace guards like a fire, so that not one of them remained. The young, courageous warrior, who had no experience of the world, gave thanks to God and entered the palace on horseback. Then he came to an idol made of Zahhak, and its head reached into the sky. When Feraydun saw that he bore a name other than that of the Creator, he overturned it. With his mace, he crushed the heads of the magicians and the demons who were in the palace, then placed his foot on Zahhak's throne in victory. He had the black-haired women of the harem, whose faces were as splendid as the sun brought before him. They had been brought up as idolaters, and were trembling and terrified, as if they were drunk, but Feraydun commanded that their minds be purified, and their souls freed from the darkness. He had them taught the ways of righteousness, and cleansed them of their idolatry. Then Jamshid's two sisters stained their cheeks with tears and said, "May the old world be renewed by your good fortune. Tell us what stars guide you, and what trees you are sprung from, and why you have dared to attack the lion's sleeping quarters so bravely. How wretchedly we've passed our days, mistreated by that fool of a magician. What sufferings we have endured at that monster's hands. We have never seen anyone strong enough or valiant enough to seek this throne." Feraydun answered, "Neither the throne nor good fortune will remain when one man forever. I am the son of the illustrious Otbin, when Zahhak seized and murdered in Iran, and I seek Zahhak's throne in revenge. The marvelous Barmaya cow was my wet nurse, and that innocent animal's blood too will be avenged by me. I have come from Persia bringing war, and I shall give that evil Zahhak no rest or peace until I have crushed his head beneath my ox-headed mace. Arnuzva said, Are you then King Feraydun, who will destroy magic and sorcery, and in killing Zahhak free the world from tyranny? We are two princesses of the royal blood, and we cooperated with him only because we feared for our lives. My lord, think what it has meant to be married to such a serpent. Feraydun replied, If the heavens are not in league with evil, I shall cleanse the world of this foul monster. Now you must tell me truly where he is lurking. These two beautiful women, who hoped to see Zahhak's head splitted on a lance, said, He has fled toward India to turn it into a land of sorcery, and there he slaughters innocents by the thousand. He is fearful of his fate, since it was predicted to him that the land would soon be rid of him, and that his good fortune was at an end, and that a man would come who would seize his throne. This warning has filled his heart with fire, and nothing in life gives him pleasure now. He murders men and women, beasts of burden and wild animals, and mixes their blood in a vat, believing that if he washes his head and body there, he might avert the astrologer's predictions. And still, the snakes that grow from his shoulders continue to torment him, though he flees from country to country. This pain, it never ceases. But now he will return, since he is unable to stay anywhere for long. The hero listened, while the lovely speaker unburdened her grief-stricken heart. When Zahhak fled from the land, a man as lowly and wretched as a slave took his place on the throne and took command of his treasures and palace. His name was Khondro, and he was a fool who practiced injustice. This man burst into the audience chamber and saw that a new prince, as handsome as a cypress tree topped by the new moon, sat on the royal throne, while on one side of him sat Shahnameh, and on the other Arnavaz. Khondro showed no emotion and asked no questions. He came forward humbly and made his obeisance. He said, O king, may you live forever. You become the throne, and the fire that shines from you declares you worthy of sovereignty. May the seven climes be your slaves, and your head be raised above the clouds. Feraydun had him approach the throne and tell him the court's secrets. Then he said, Have the royal regalia cleansed. Then have wine, musicians, and a banquet made ready. Bring whomever can please me with their music or knowledge, so that I can hold a feast worthy of my good fortune. Khondro did as he had been ordered. He had wine and musicians brought, and assembled nobles worthy of the honor of the prince's presence. When Feraydun saw the wine, he called for music, and passed the night in festive celebration. But as dawn broke, Khondro left his presence, mounted his horse, and set off to join Zahhak. When he reached Zahhak, he told him everything he had seen and heard. He said, Proud king, the sign of your good fortune's eclipse has come. 3 warriors attacked us with their armies. The central one is younger than the others, but in his stature he is like a cypress, and his face shines with royal splendor. He is younger than his brothers, but he leads them and is their superior. He carries a mace that is like a fragment of a mountain, and his glory outshines that of his companions. He rode into the palace accompanied by his brothers, and took his place on your throne. Then he destroyed all your idols and spells, and flung your courtiers, both men and demons, from the castle walls, mixing their brains and their blood in death. Zahhak said, There's nothing wrong in this. He is our guest, and everything may still be for the best. Khondro replied, When did a guest ever arrive flourishing an ox-headed mace? Or take your place on the throne and erase your name from the crown and royal belt, then convert your people to his own faith? If you think this man is your guest, I wish you joy of him. Zahhak said, Don't bother me with these complaints. Don't whine. Demanding guests are an auspicious sign. Khondro replied, So I've heard, but listen to this. If this man is your guest, what business has he in your harem? He sits on the throne with Jamshid's sisters next to him and takes counsel with them. One hand fondles Shahnameh's cheeks, while the other is kissed by Arnav's agate lips. And when night's darkness comes, he does more than that. He sleeps pillowed on the musky hair of those two women who were your beloved companions. Hearing these words, Zahhak desired death and roared like a wild animal. He fell to cursing his wretched fate and said, "You will never be my castle guardian again." His servant replied, "My lord, I think that you will never see your throne again. What was the point of making me the ruler of your country when you lacked all authority? Nothing like this has ever happened to you, so why don't you act in your own defense? You've been forced from power as a hare is forced out of dough." Enraged, Zahhak ordered that his swift, keen-sighted horse be saddled, and with a massive army of warlike demons he set off for his palace. There, intent on vengeance, he clandestinely had his men take the outlying doors and roofs. The Feraydun men saw this and swarmed to the attack. They were aided by all of the city's inhabitants who could fight, since they hated Zahhak. Like dew from dark clouds, bricks and stones rained down from the walls and roofs, and the narrow streets were cluttered with swords and arrows. All the young men of the city and the old had experience of warfare, deserted Zahhak, and flocked to Feraydun. A cry came up from the fire temple. "Even if the king is a beast of prey, young and old, we shall all obey him, but we will not have his evil monster Zahhak occupy the throne." An army of men thronged the city, and such a dust of cloud went up that the sun was dimmed. Jealousy of his rival's success made Zahhak seek another remedy. Separating himself from his men, he dressed himself in iron armor so that he was unrecognizable. He sieged a lariat of 60 lengths and made his way to the roof of the palace. From there he could see the black-haired sorceress Shahnameh, her cheeks as bright as day, her hair as dark as night, closeted with Feraydun and cursing Zahhak. He knew then what had happened was fated by God, and that he could not escape from evil fate, that which was in store for him. The fire of jealousy flared up in his mind, and forgetting his throne and the risk to his life, he let himself down into the palace with his lariat. He did not announce himself, but drew a glittering dagger, intent on shedding his handmaiden's blood. As Zahhak's foot touched the ground, Feraydun leaped forward like the wind and brought his ox-headed mace crashing down on Zahhak's head, so that his helmet was shattered. At that moment, the angel Sarish appeared and said, "Do not strike him again. His time has not yet come. Now that you have broken his power, bind him and take him to where you see a pass between two mountains. He will live imprisoned within the mountain, and his people will never be able to reach him." Feraydun lost no time in preparing strips of lion skin with which he bound Zahhak's arms and body so tightly that a raging elephant could not have broken his bonds. Then he sat on Zahhak's golden throne and overturned the tyrant's evil customs. He had a herald cry at the palace gates, "You are wise and honored men. It is not right for you to be wielding weapons and riding out to war in the way that soldiers should not be artisans. Each group should follow its own calling, since if they follow one another's, the earth is filled with confusion. The evil tyrant has been captured, and the earth is cleansed of his power. Return in peace to your former occupations, and may you live long and happily." All the nobles and rich men of the city came to pay homage to Feraydun, who received them kindly, gave them advice, and thanked them, and also gave thanks to God. He said, "This is my court, and my star will bring good fortune to your land. As my mace has freed the world from the monster's evil, I am lord of the entire earth, and I should not stay always in one place, otherwise I would have lived here for you for many years." The nobles kissed the ground before him, and the din of drums rang out from the court. The bound Zahhak was laid out, ignominiously flung on a pack animal's back, and taken to Shere Khan. When they reached the mountains, Feraydun wished to kill Zahhak, but again Sarish appeared and spoke persuasively in his ear, telling him to take this solitary, wretched captive to the Mount Damaved. Feraydun did this as quickly as a courier travels, and imprisoned Zahhak at Mount Damavand, loading chains on him and confining him to a narrow cave that seemed to have no end. Heavy nails were driven into his body, avoiding his vital organs, and pinning him to the rock, so that he would suffer there for a long, long time. So he was left hanging in the chains, with his heart blood staining the ground. And here's where I leave my reading for today, but I will be back tomorrow.